So let's continue from where we left off. In the previous session, we talked about most of what you see around here. We introduced Rust. We also introduced like Actix Web because that's our framework of choice, at least as it pertains to backend development for now. And then we walked you a little bit on the installation process, this whole topic, right? You can see over here. And then we got to the interesting part. Talked a little bit about actors and features. We started like a simple Hello World app, and then we started to develop and work on it. We also covered like routing and paths and query parameters as well. So if you look over here in main, you will already see some of the things we covered in the first session of the tutorial. We also talked about sharing and managing mutable states, for example, across several endpoints. And like we discussed over here, you could actually pass reusable information more or less. Would want your APIs to have something like database connection string, for example, and the likes. So most of these are actually what we covered in the previous session. And I just wanted to show you something a little bit about the server before we proceed. So normally when it comes to Actix Web, at least for developing backend applications, normally it is automatically multi-threaded, and what it means is that by default it's definitely going to use like the number of it's going to start a number of HTTP workers depending of course on um, the number of CPUs you have more or less in your system. So, but you also of course have the option to actually modify this to set it to whatever you would want to, so we can actually come over here and maybe of course set workers, and here we can simply specify the number of workers, for example, that we would want to do. If you for example have like, I don't know, a number of CPUs and you would want to use a portion of it and not everything, and otherwise it defaults to the number of CPUs more or less you have in your system. So that was one thing I quickly wanted to show you. Anyways, so let's proceed by starting to structure our code a little bit. I'm just going to zoom out here to give us a little bit room, so we can like have more room to work. So more or less what I would like to do is to try to separate our APIs, of course, from our business logic. And so for now, I'm just going to keep this restructuring like a little, like not going too deep, like trying to use some maybe some pattern more or less. For now, I'm just separation of files. As we proceed, I will introduce patterns, and then we can use those patterns to even go further and structure our code. So anyways, I'm going to come in here to create a folder called API. So this is actually what's going to hold all our API definitions. We'll have all of them in here. And in here, I would like to have one called handlers. So within these handlers, that's actually where we define our business logic. That those different endpoints is actually going to um, be defined in more or less. So, and I would like to also have one called models. So this is where I would define all our models and maybe implement also, like if we need to have some implementations on those models, we can have all of those here. And for now, I'm going to add another file called utils. So within utils, we can actually leave our utility functions. Maybe I zoom in a little bit here so you can still see me. Maybe with time I can now decide if we need more models, and then I can zoom out. So anyways, this is how I would like to proceed, because I would like to clear out our main file. If you see here, it's really quite cluttered. And of course, this is not really what we want. We want to have like a separation of concerns, more or less. So within API, I would like to define a number of files, but the first file, of course, I would like to create here would be a um, mod rs file. So this is where will actually help us to kind of like export all the modules we would have defined within this API scope. That would be the idea. And of course, I would like to have this for all our folders that we just created. So I'm just going to go ahead, copy those and put them in there. And now what I can already do maybe is to come in here and then use this here. So I can say mod API, mod handlers, mod models, and then mod utils. So this will of course just bring those files into scope. And now we can actually go ahead to start structuring our code. So within here, I might want to have a file called public. So here I might define, I might have things like my, login, maybe register, for example, like basically the endpoints that we would have here that would not require any form of authentication, basically open to the public. So these are some of the endpoints I might want to have in here. And then I might also have one called auth. So this would be like for when you're already logged in or when you're already authenticated, more or less. We could have things here like maybe create. So when you would want to create, make an entry, for example, or whatever operations that an authenticated user might be expected to perform. I would like to have all of those in here. And for now, again, I'm going to keep this as simple as possible. So we don't have to clutter the whole place. We don't have to actually do the whole implementation. For now, I'm just going to keep it as simple as possible. Okay, so now I'm going to move. So here we have login. So I'm going to copy this. Actually, I'm going to cut this and bring it in here. And so for now, this is not within the scope because we are currently not tracking this file actually. So I'm just going to come into our mod file within API and then I say pub mod and now public. So now this should be within scope, and now of course I should get errors regarding like the imports that we don't have. So I'm just going to copy everything in here. Now I can actually zoom out so we have more real estate. So I can paste all of this here. This should solve everything, and then I can clear out what we don't need. That's what I would want to do. So I remove this. We don't need it. We don't need this. We don't need this. Maybe I'll leave this for now. It's fine. And of course, so now we have this app state here, and then of course this login requests, and of course those are not defined in here. But if we come here, we would have our app state that like we have it over here. So I'm going to copy this actually and come over to models, and I create a file here. I can call this states.rs. So this is where I would like this to live. And then maybe in here, of course, I did pub mod state. And now we come over to state. Of course, we need mutex. So again, I come in here and copy this because I'm lazy to type. And we have this. So now I can actually, maybe I can also maybe take our login request, which is this guy. I'm gonna copy it. And then maybe within models, I can create a file and I can call this maybe auth. So everything relating to authentication, I can actually just dump those in here for now. Again, pub mod auth so that I can come back in here and then again, I'll copy all of this. I don't think I need all of those anyways, but that's fine. So now I can actually get rid of all of this. Okay, and now we have this. So I can now actually come in here and I use create, and I need to go through now I need to go to models, and within models I want auth and states. I want auth and state, and now I can actually from here I can actually go to I can actually go to see here, for example, I can say state. If I can type, and this should be fine for app states. Why don't we stay? How? Of course, it's private, so we can come over here to state and make this pub. Not. I was actually going to type that out completely. Anyways, so we make this available this way, and of course we do the same in here. So here would be auth, and we have our login request, and again we also need to come in here and make it public, and of course I would like to make the attributes public as well so we can have access to it. And now we have our login properly separated like this. So that's one thing we wanted to have over here, and then I can actually come into main to see what else we can actually move So maybe we can also move register, for example. So I'll cut this as well and put it in here. And again, we do the same. So I can again expand this a little bit so we have more space. And now I need to find our user model. Again, I'm going to cut this and go to models, come to auth and put it in here. And we have it. Again, I'm going to make it, of course, public. And I need to make all the attributes public as well, so we of course have access to them. That would be the idea actually. So we have this defined, and now I can actually then come in here and then of course a auth. And for this guy as well, I'm going to expand this a little bit more. So auth. And now this should be fine. Okay, so now I can come back to main. Of course, when I save, I get more errors because now this guy is actually not defined, but that's also totally fine. And we would get back to this in a bit, but I would like to, of course, show you the thought process here. So now I like to go to public, for example, because now I want you to understand like why I'm actually doing this way. So maybe I can first come in here and come to web.scope, this one, and just copy all of this actually. So I'll copy this and then go back to auth. And now I can create a public function. And I can call this get public services, something like this. And then it should be able to return an Actix scope. So Actix Web, and I need the scope. And now I can actually return this. So I go back here again, I add this pub mod. No, this is already added, pub mod. Anyways, I add auth as well, that's also fine. And I think I put it in the wrong file. So again, I'm gonna cut this and come into public API. I think I got it all mixed up. I will actually, maybe I put this in here, that's also fine. But for now, I would like to cut all of this. I would come in here to handlers and create a new folder, and I call this public. And so within public, I can now create a new file, and I call this login.rs. So I want to separate all these logics separately. I don't want them to be cluttered in the same file. So here, I will also like to have register.rs, and I'll copy everything in here. Come into, so within public again, I'll create a mod.rs file, and then in here I can say pub mod public. Come on. So I come back here and I say pub mod and then public, so that within public I can now say pub mod login, and for now pub mod register, so that we have all these new files in scope. And again, I can come back here, copy all of this, and then come back to login. I want it to be on this window so you can see it. So I come back here to login, and now I delete this. And of course, I don't need get anymore. And then I come back to register. I have this here, then I get rid of this one. And what do we not need? So we don't need this state anymore, as you can see. So I remove these parts. And of course, I think I can now get rid of post as well. So this is cleaner. And then if we go to login again, so this also looks cleaner. And now what we can actually do is the public we have here, which is what I also have on this in this window. What I would like to have here is actually just the API definition. I don't want to have this in here, so I get rid of all of this. And so now what I can actually do is to just come in here. So I don't need to use these crits anymore because we actually really don't need it. So now I can simply just use handlers, and within handlers, I would like to get public. And so that's here, I can say public dot login. Is it? I think it's could not be found. Public. Yes, of course. I need to go one level. No, no, that's fine. So what is the problem? Yes, of course. So I can do it like this, login, and now I can come in here and say login. Let's login like this, and then I can actually get rid of these ones, and now I can maybe also bring in register, and then here again register dot register. That's totally fine, and actually don't need this part, not necessary. It should be fine like this, and we can get rid of all of this, not needed anymore, and it should be fine like this. So now we have this defined this way. So what we can now actually do is to come back to main, and in here I would like to create a new service, and this service is basically going to be for my public endpoints. So I can now actually say API and public, and I say get public services like this, and I can actually get rid of this and this because we now have them in here. Now you can actually come in here and replace this with public. So what we have actually succeeded in doing is to not, of course, have everything clutter our main file, but now we can actually separate these APIs into like different modules, and then we can actually work on them. So if we need to add another endpoint, all we need to do is, of course, define the business logic, then come in here and map that here to a different service, and then we are good to go. That's really all. So our file in here doesn't really need to change, no matter whether the APIs on the public grows or not. And of course, from the definition here, it's also easy for us to actually tell which service this belongs to. Here it clearly says get public services, something like that. So that's actually the thought process. And what we can now actually maybe do is to, of course, move these ones here around. So to do that, again, we'll come in here, we create a folder. I can call this auth, for example. And now what I can do is to come in here within auth, and then of course, initially I create my mod.rs file, and then I can create my login.rs, and I come back to main. So I need of course, this should be, this should have been log out. And now I can cut this guy, come into log out and paste it in. And of course I need, let me come back in here. So there is fetch user and get user. I don't even know why we named them some similar, but anyways, I'm just going to cut this from here. So get user and fetch user. And now I can come back in here and I can maybe call this get user. And maybe I can just name this other one gets users like this. And then I can just dump this in here. That's fine. And then here, of course, pub mod, we say gets user. And we have to first add this in here. So we get IntelliSense, pub mod auth. And now we can come back to mod. So get users, then pub mod get users like this. And that's totally fine. So we can come in here, of course, again, you can go to main, copy all of this, come back to get user, and then paste it, and then we'll clear out what we don't need. Okay, so again, we have the same app state and path params. I'm going to expand this a little bit so we have more room to work. And so app states is again pretty straightforward. We can just do what we did in here. Boom, what we did in public. So let's go to login. We can simply just copy this guy, put it in here. And now this will become, of course, state. That's app state. And now we still have path param. So let's go back to mains. We defined it somewhere here. So I'm just going to cut this again. And now we go to our models. For now, I'm just going to put it inside auth. And again, make it public. So we can have access to it. And of course, its attributes. So I make the name, the ID, and the email, of course, public. And now I can come back to get users. And now I can change this to auth. So this should come from auth, and then now that's totally fine. And again, we can of course do the same here. And now all of this should be fine. So now I can clear out the imports that we don't need. So we don't need this, we don't need this. And of course I can remove the mutex because that's also not being used anymore. And now this should be fine. So, but of course we have all of this together. So this is actually get user. So this should stay. I'm gonna copy this, get rid of this guy, because it's not needed, and then maybe get rid of state because it's also not needed, and they should be fine. And then get users, I'm just going to dump this here and remove this part. And then maybe I make it consistent and I say get users like this, and now they should be fine. So, and I think we also had log out. Let me try to find it or not. Maybe we didn't have log out, but I'm just probably going to copy this guy and maybe make that in here. So pub mod logout, and then within logout again, here we already copied something, so I'm just going to copy what we have over here and paste it in here, and that should be fine. So actually none of this was actually being used, so I'll get rid of that. That's totally fine. And now we do the same like we did here. So within auth, I'm just going to copy what we have in here and come to auth and paste it, and I can say get auth services. And now instead of now this should now come from auth. So I don't want to guess. I'm just going to remove all of this auth. And now we have get user. We will still clean this up in the future anyway. So let's work with this one now. Get users and maybe log out. And now I can of course put all of this here. So get users, get user rather. So it's get user. And why is my IntelliSense slow? Okay, so get users, we do exactly the same. Get users. And of course, we take care of logout as well. So say that service, and then we log out, and that's totally fine. That's actually what we want. And now again, we can come into main, and now all of these are no longer necessary. So now we can say app auth, and then get out of services like this. And that's really one cool way we can clean things up. And this echo, I can actually get rid of it because we don't need it anymore. So I'm going to remove it here as well. And then maybe I'd place this with health. So this becomes our health endpoint, something like this. And app states is still in here, but now I don't want to use it from here anymore. So I want it to come from my models slash state slash auth state. And now I can get rid of this one. And let's also see login. Login is not being used, so I can get rid of it as well. And I can get rid of this once again, get rid of this. And our code should be clean. So we have all of this cleaned out, so this is what we have right now. So what we have only done, actually, we've not done anything new. We simply just moved things around, and we had all these different sub-modules that we've created within our project, just so we can have our main file just like this for now. Of course, the server parts, we will still take care of this because we don't want this main function to even know how we are instantiating our server. It doesn't need to know actually. So we need to, of course, abstract this into a separate function. But this is something we'll definitely carry out later in the series. The point would be, of course, not to. The point would really be to show you how you can get started working with Rust. For now, we are starting with our web server, our backend server, and of course, with time, would progress, move away from backend, and then do other interesting things. Because again, you should remember what we said. We said that we will at least build these 6 projects in this tutorial before we are through. So that's really the end. So you can actually think of this first parts of this series as introduction, and of course, maybe again working with a backend server in Rust. That's really the idea. So anyways, we have this our code this way. I'm just gonna clean all of this up. Um, and now you can actually see that we now have a lot of things going on in here. And maybe to see if everything is still as expected, we can say cargo watch. Remember, we were using this watch, cargo watch, to more or less constantly listen to changes to our project, and of course have like an auto reload, so we don't have to stop our server and restart it. So we say cargo watch execute run, and our server should be up if everything goes as expected. Now everything is as expected, our server is up. So now if we save any file, for example, you see on the terminal here, we have like a rebuild and a reload. That's actually what we want. So I can close the terminal one more time, and then we can again proceed. So if we look back here, we wanted to, of course, talk a little bit about APIs and then handling JSON data, which we most have, of course, done in our previous tutorial. So the most important things I would like to show you now would be, of course, static files handling and error handling and status code. This also is interesting because to do this also, what I would want to do would be to maybe like in these handlers, for example, where we are, for example, doing something like this, I would not want us to return string anymore, but at least to return a predefined response object. That would be the idea here. So let's move on already, and then I can show you all these parts. So let's proceed. So the first thing I would like to show you more or less would be how we can, of course, return like, for example, a JSON response with like a custom response payload. And the first thing I would like to do more or less is, apart from the serialize, I would also like to implement the serialize straight on my user model. So we can, of course, encode and decode JSON. So I put that in here, and that should be fine. And now let's go back to, let's say, get users. So if you remember right now here, we are really not doing much. We are simply just logging this in here, nothing much. And of course, this endpoint is simply returning an object that implements this responder. So what we can actually do more or less is to take care of this ourselves and change how this is implemented right now. So one thing I would like to do, the first thing of course I would like to do here would be to change the how the response is, what is being returned actually. And to do this, I would like to change this to a result, because I would like to have the option of returning two things. So of course, if it's successful, I would like to return like, say, a JSON, and then in the end, if it fails, then I would like to return an error. So here I will have to again do like we did before, but now it would be an optional thing that we return. And then the next thing here is that I would like to return something called HTTP error. So this is going to be our own implementation. Right now we don't have it implemented, but of course we would just go ahead now and implement. This is really going to be pretty straightforward. So we go over to our to our utils, and where should we put this? Okay, now I'm going to put it in models, and I'm going to create a new file. Actually, I'm just going to call this errors. So all the implementation would have in the future for our error would actually be here. So for now, let's just move forward. So pop struct HTTP error. So for now, we're just gonna have just one um, attribute called message. It's gonna be of type string for now. I'm just gonna keep it as simple as possible. So message type string, and then of course I would like to bring this into focus. So pub mod errors. So we can now work on this error. The only thing that the main thing that this our custom error needs to implement, of course, would be the standard response error from Actix. So that's also pretty straightforward to do. So from Actix Web, we bring in error, as simple as this, and now we simply just implement the response error trait for our struct. So we import error, and we need the response error, and then we implement it for our struct. That's actually the most important thing we need to implement. And then of course we need to add some attributes here. For example, as already seen, we need to implement the display traits, but I'm just going to go ahead and add more traits, because I would like to do more things beyond just the display trait. So I would add the debug. I would add, of course, display, come on, and I will also need the error. And this error and display are actually going to come from derive more. So again, I'll use derive more. And I don't think we have this installed, but we're going to go ahead and install this in a bit. So I need display and error. And so now I'm just going to go ahead and then add this to our cargo toml, so we'll have it installed. So now let's go to cargo toml. I'm just going to paste this derive more in here, and then give it a couple of seconds, more or less, or maybe minutes, so it can actually rebuild our code, and then we can proceed. So now we have our package installed. I would like to, of course, add one more thread in here. And so this, of course, would come from display. Would, of course, allow me add some formatting, more or less, to our error message. So I can see something like this: error message, or maybe just say error response, like this. And now I simply provide the error, the message rather. So I provide it like this. So now this is totally fine. So now we need to go back into user, and in here, aside auths, we'll also like to import errors. So that here we can simply say errors .http error. And now, of course, our response type would start to complain, because now it's no longer fitting to like what we actually need to return in the end. And that's also totally fine. What we can actually now do is, because users, of course, has to return users, for example, here we can actually say let's user, and this user is going to be, of course, it's going to be of type say auth user model. I think this is already like this. And now we just need to provide the content of our user model, as you can see here. So we have first name, and I'm just gonna keep it quite simple, and I say we have, what else? We have last name, and what else? We have password, and then we have email. And so maybe what I can really do here is to just pass my email that I'm getting here. And now I think I actually need to just pass this, because this is expecting a string now, not like a string literal. And so all these parts we don't need anymore, because now I can simply say okay, and I'll pass the user, and this should be fine. But of course here I need to take care of this part. So I can say Tony, and I say to come on to string, and last name again quite the same, and here as well. And so now let's see what the error is. Yes, of course, I will have to wrap this within a JSON. So I can say web.json, and I simply pass my user, and that should be fine. Okay, so now I need to see what here the problem is. Of course, anyways, that's also fine. So for now, we can simply maybe do a clone. That's also totally fine. And now, of course, last name, I'm going to add some dummy information here. So password, maybe I add some bunch of asterisks. That's also fine. And now and now I can actually get rid of this. We don't need it anymore. So what we have actually just done is to define and change more or less the kind of response object we would want to return to the user. And we also have like our own defined error response. So what it means, for example, is let's say here we make a query to the DB, and then we handle the error, blah, blah, blah. So if error, and then here we return error. And this error would have to, of course, wrap our errors HTTP error, and now we provide a custom message like this. So this is actually how it's gonna be. So but for now this is totally fine because it serves our purpose. So if we go back to, I think we had our HTTP file somewhere, this one. So if we I don't think we still have get users. So of course we can also do that, that's not a problem. So of course this is no longer going to work because now login is within the public grouping. But if we go to auth, we have get users, so we should be at slash auth, sorry, and this should be at slash public. So now we can go to slash auth, and then maybe users at slash user, and we have this user ID email. That's also fine. So let's come back here. Probably I'll just copy this one, or maybe we can already use this one. That's also fine. And let's just send a request. And I think we visited the wrong one. Yeah, now this is the correct one. So now you can see over here we are getting our JSON response. So that's, as you can see, that's actually quite simple and straightforward. So if you wanted to have like a different like a response model, for example, it's pretty straightforward to go ahead, define whatever structure you would want to have, and then of course have this wrapped and returned to the user this way. The really important thing, of course, would be that this user model would need to, of course, implement this important threads. Quite important for encoding and decoding of JSON. And yeah, it's also pretty straightforward. So the next interesting thing maybe I would also want to show you, of course, would be with this error. So important information, of course, I would like to let you understand here is that this implementation over here, this thread here, actually enforces, for example, that this custom error we have over here implements quite two important functions. One of them would be, of course, that has to do with the response itself, and the other one has to be the status code. So what happens is that with the implementation we have right now, we will be going with the default implementations that come from this thread. Um, but of course, we have the possibility to change this if we wanted to. And again, this is pretty straightforward how we can actually do this. I can also maybe show you a simple example, at least how we can proceed in this regard. So what it means that within here, we can override the default. As you can already see here, we can override the error response function, and we can also override the status code function. So here you can implement within your code how you want this to be handled. So for example, here we can do something that's actually pretty straightforward. If you also see what we have over here, actually what I can actually do is maybe just this is not returned. Um, so what I can actually do here is maybe just return a HTTP response, and maybe to keep it simpler, I'm just going to change the way we have our imports over here. So I'm going to put this in a different line to make it a lot easier to read. So this also goes to a new line. And then here I would like to, of course, get the HTTP module, and then within it, I need the header, and sorry, I need the content type. Where are you? It's down here, and I need the status code, and this is what I need. And maybe also I need the HTTP response. So I can actually just, I don't want to do it like this. I want to make it easier for me to access. So we have HTTP response like this, and now we can return an HTTP response. So say HTTP response slash build, because there is a builder. This can already tell you that the pattern how this is implemented is of course the builder pattern, which would be of course maybe something I would, if we have time, I can also show you in this series, but that's also okay. So we can get our status code, for example, and now we get to make more modifications. For example, if we want to, we can do things like insert header, and then here we can um, provide a header. I can actually say maybe content type, and I don't know, JSON, whatever. We can do whatever we want to do, and and I can of course maybe add as many of them as I want, because again this is implemented using the builder pattern, so it's pretty straightforward and handy to where you can work with it. Anyways, let's say I'm done with what I want to have here. I can now add a body, and within the body I can simply just return the body as a string, and this should now be fine. That's as simple as that. Again, you're pretty customizable. You have the option to do whatever it is you would want to do here. And then the interesting thing, of course, for us would be this status code. I can again get rid of this because that's really not required anymore. And now what I can actually do is, this is where now you have the option to maybe implement an enum where you have like different errors cases or error scenarios, for example, within your app that you would like to handle. And then all you have to do is more or less to pass those enum here and then match those enum and then decide the status code you would like to return to the user. Pretty straightforward. So what we can do, maybe just to show you, we can create an enum and we can call it something like app error whatever. I'm just going to leave it as simple as this, as app error. And then within here I would like to add a certain errors, so we can define some of the things we would actually have in normal backend app. So we can have internal error, we can have let's say unauthorized, and we can have maybe unauthenticated, whatever. And here we can have status okay. We can have yes status no, I don't want this. Of course are not error scenarios. um I was carried away there, so we can have like timeout, for example, or we can even have things like say bad or in whatever you would want to have here. Actually, we can say invalid credentials. Maybe this is some scenario, whatever, but again this might again be similar to of course unauthorized, but depending on what you're implementing you have the option to of course do all of this. And anyways, I would like to add some implement some default threads. So I would like to, of course I would like to have debug, and again I would like to have display like we did before. And then this is again going to come from derive more. So I think we already have this imported here. That's totally fine. And what I would probably want to do is maybe to format this again, of course, for using display. So here we can do something um like some formatted way we would want to represent our errors. So I can say fmt, and here I would like to maybe give it some name. I can say internal server error, for example, something like this. And now I can maybe copy all of this and do same for all of them. And of course, they're all not going to be internal server errors. You can again change all of this. So here we can say invalid user credentials. Here we can say again, like we have in here, say on authenticated, and here we say maybe unauthorized error. And here also maybe we can of course say something like yeah, I think that's totally fine. Of course, this is for invalid credentials. Now here we can say maybe requests timeout. And here we can say, of course, unauthorized internal server error, and as the case may be. Maybe here again, I can just change this to unauthorized error, and now this one would be unauthenticated error. Whatever it is you would want to do, of course, you have the option to do that here. And now what we can simply now do here is we match our like more or less handle the status code that we're getting this way. And now we have to, of course, handle all these different scenarios that we have here. So we have our app error. So when it is internal server error, what do we want to do? So status code would become, say, internal server error, as simple as this. And now we have to go ahead and implement the same for all of them. So I'm just going to pause the video and then implement all of them so we don't lose so much time. So I've gone ahead to add all the missing implementations. I probably also should collapse this so we have more real estate. So I've gone ahead to implement all the rest we have, but now you can see over here we now get this error that's it's expected HTTP error and now found app error. And of course that's because now we are replacing what we had here with the new implementation we have done here. And that's also pretty fine because now what we can actually do would be to get rid of this, because again this is actually just doing this only now that this has the option of handling more errors at the same time. So I'm simply going to copy HTTP error because I want the name, and I'll put it in here, and I get rid of this. Don't need this anymore. So I replace all of this, just so we can now have our new implementation, and that should be fine. And now what we need to do is to come in here and of course handle the error here. And the only error we have here actually is that this is private, so that's also fine. We can come in here and then make our enum public, and that's totally fine. That's all we have to do. And now we have all these different implementations again, like I said, which you can extend and take care of whatever possible scenarios you might run into in your own application. And that's it, guys. That's how easy it is. We can handle errors in our own way, with our own custom messages. And again, here you can be more creative. You can add more descriptive messages in here. So that's, of course, maybe whoever is consuming your API or whatever would have like a meaningful message that they can easily respond to. So that's really it for here for this, of course, handling of errors and status codes. And that would be mostly it for this series. So the next thing that we have here, of course, static files handling. I think this might actually, from what I can see here, take a little bit longer than we anticipated. So for that, I would move this to a separate series. Of course, definitely be rest assured we'll cover this, but I want us to not overload each of the series so you would have like it's been longer than expected. Anyways, would leave it at here, and then of course would move static files further down the road to the projects we have done. and then we would definitely cover this, of course. And that will be all, guys. Until next time, of course, have a lovely evening, and we'll see each other next time. Bye bye.